Hello, my name is Joseph Wise, and for week 2 discussion, I'm going to be talking about the federal and state courts, specifically California court procedures, the significance of the Supreme Court case Marbury versus Madison, and two judicial writs, which are formal orders issued by a court. As the U.S. Supreme Court is established under Article 3 of the U.S. Constitution, it's the highest court in the United States. It has a total of 9 justices, 1 Chief Justice, and 8 Associate Justices. They select and hear cases that they want to hear. They are the final court of appeals for appellate jurisdiction. Um, so when a case is heard in the U.S. district courts and it is appealed to the federal courts of appeal, and it's appealed again, it will get appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, and that is the highest court. It cannot get appealed to any higher court. So when they hear a case, it's called judicial review. They have original jurisdiction and can act as trial court. So, for example, the federal government versus a state or 2 or more states are in litigation with each other. Another example is cases involving foreign ministers or ambassadors. They can also hear cases brought on by citizens of one state against citizens of another state, or citizens of one state against a foreign country. They can also hear cases involving crimes committed in the in the high seas, which could be in international waters. So this is like crimes committed by pirates. And Supreme Court cases that are on appeal, they must raise a federal question. So if it might have to do with freedom of speech or freedom of religion, and they usually hear a case or controversy. So they hear case that where law has to already have been established. So Congress passes a law, it's established and implemented, and now say that there's injury. There has to be some sort of stake in the case where for the U.S. Supreme Court to hear it and rule on it. Or if there is a circuit split. So let's say for the U.S. District Court, they hear a case, it gets ruled on, it gets appealed, and it goes to the circuit courts, and let's say the Ninth Circuit Court rules on it one way, and the Fifth Circuit Court rules on it another way. That's considered a circuit split, and the U.S. Supreme Court will now hear that case and make a ruling. These are our current Supreme Court justices, and a interesting fact about each of them. This is Amy Coney Barrett on the left, and before becoming a justice, she was a law professor at Notre Dame and was known for rarely using notes while teaching constitutional law. We have Neil Gorsuch. He is known for writing many of his opinions himself rather than relying on law clerks, which is uncommon among justices. We have Sonia Sotomayor. She became the first Hispanic and Latina justice in the Supreme Court history, and grew up in a public housing project in the Bronx, New York. We have Clarence Thomas. He is the second African American justice in Supreme Court history after Thurgood Marshall, whose seat that he filled. We have John Roberts. He was originally nominated to the Supreme Court as an associate justice, but after Chief Justice Rehnquist died, George W. Bush changed the nomination and Roberts became the Chief Justice. We have Ketanji Brown Jackson. She is the first Black woman ever appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court and previously worked as a federal public defender. We have Samuel Alito, and before joining the Supreme Court, he worked as a federal prosecutor and later served on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit for about 15 years. We have Elena Kagan. She was the first woman to serve as Solicitor General of the United States before becoming a justice. And we have Brett Kavanaugh, who once worked in the White House under President George W. Bush and helped investigate President Bill Clinton during the Starr investigation. Here's the federal courts of appeal, or the circuit courts, and they review lower court decisions. There's 12 districts, 11 regions plus Washington, D.C., and cases are usually heard by a panel of 3 judges. And you can see here a map of the districts. We got the Ninth Circuit that might judge on the liberal side, and then down there you see the Fifth Circuit where they might judge more conservatively. The U.S. district courts, this is the lowest of the federal courts. There are 94 district courts, and cases are heard by 1 judge. Federal law has to be in question. And the 4 scenarios where federal courts have original jurisdiction is if it's involving the Constitution, so First Amendment, Second Amendment. It might be involving treaties, for example, tariffs, or that the U.S. government is part of litigation, so they are one of the parties. So it could be the federal government versus state, or more than 1 state are involved, and has more than $70,000 involved. So now we're getting into state courts, and this is the highest court in California. This is the California Supreme Court, which is located primarily in San Francisco. They are the final arbiter on issues of California state law. So they review major state laws and questions and death penalty appeals. Our California Supreme Court justices, we got the Chief Justice, Patricia Guerrero. She made history as the first Latina Chief Justice of California when she took office in 2023. To the left of her, we have Carol Corrigan. Before becoming a justice, she worked as prosecutor and later became known for being one of the court's more modern voices. On the other side of Chief Justice there, we have Goodwin Liu. He was once nominated to the federal Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, but the nomination became highly controversial in the Senate before later joining the California Supreme Court. Above him, we have Kelly Evans. Before joining the court, she worked on federal civil rights and police reform cases for the U.S. Department of Justice. And to the left of her, we have Joshua Groban. Before becoming a justice, he served as Governor Jerry Brown's senior legal advisor and judicial appointments secretary. Then we have Leandra Kruger. She argued 12 cases before the U.S. Supreme Court before turning 40, which is extremely rare for an attorney. She is also one of the youngest justices on the court. And then Martin Jenkins, before becoming a judge, he briefly played professional football for the Seattle Seahawks. Here's our California Courts of Appeal. This is the next court lower from the California Supreme Court. They review trial court decisions, and we have 6 appellate districts. So we have the first appellate district, which is San Francisco. We have the second appellate district, which is Los Angeles. The third appellate district, which is Sacramento. The fourth appellate district, which is San Diego. We have the fifth appellate district, which is Fresno, and then we have the sixth appellate district, which is San Jose. So this is our lowest court in California. This is the California Superior Court. They review trial courts for California, so criminal cases, real estate, family court, juvenile court, traffic, marriage, property damage, etc. So we have 58 superior courts total, 1 for each county, and we have, you can see the 4 districts there. They are normally heard by 1 judge or a judge and a jury. We're going to get into our case brief here. This is Marbury versus Madison. So in summary, there was a presidential election in 1800. John Adams versus Thomas Jefferson, and Jefferson defeats Adams. Before leaving office, though, Adams appoints 23 judges to the federal D.C. courts, which is approved by the Senate, and then the final step was for John Adams' Secretary of State, John Marshall, to deliver the commission papers so these judges could work. But that happened right at the end of his presidency. So the next day, Thomas Jefferson is now in office, and he orders his Secretary of State, James Madison, not to deliver the rest of the commissions. So one judge whose commission was held up was William Marbury. And Marbury wanted the Supreme Court to hear the case, which was within their jurisdiction based on the Federal Judiciary Act of 1789. The Supreme Court heard the case, but in 1803. So it took a couple years for the Supreme Court to actually hear the case. And by then, John Adams, Secretary of State, John Marshall, is now the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. So he is the one who is reviewing, the Chief Justice in the Supreme Court that is reviewing this case. So the ruling basically was that Marbury had the right to the job, but the Supreme Court did not have the power to make James Madison hand over the commission paperwork. So they ruled that the Judiciary Act of 1789 was unconstitutional, and that act gave the court powers the Constitution said it should not have. So this ruling gave the Supreme Court the power to rule on whether or not a law passed by Congress was unconstitutional. And that is where we get judicial review. So this is one of the judicial writs that we're going to be talking about. This is the writ of mandamus, which is an order from a higher court directing a lower court or a government official to perform a duty they're legally required to do. So, for example, Marbury wanted the Supreme Court to force James Madison to deliver his commission paperwork. This is the writ of certiorari, which is an order by a higher court, usually the Supreme Court of the United States, to review a lower court's decision. So if 4 Supreme Court justices vote to allow review of a case, the court orders a writ of certiorari, and it is delivered to the lower court, and it basically tells them to send up all their documents so they can review the case and make a ruling. So in closing here, what I'm learning about the judicial system is that they play a very important role in protecting the rights of citizens, interpreting laws, and they maintain balance within the federal government and state government. So, local all the way down. So from local courts all the way to the United States Supreme Court, each level of the court system helps ensure justice and that it's applied fairly and according to the Constitution. So understanding how the courts operate, I think, helps me better understand our rights and the legal system.